Hello and welcome to our webinar for November 2017. On behalf of Toronto Agile Community, I am Ardita Karai, and with me are other volunteers like Peter Jake and Paul Henman that have helped us during this year to set up webinars like this one that we have in plan for today. So today we're going to talk about the implementation of Holacracy at iQmetrix. And with us is Nevin Danielson, the kind of like the mastermind behind implementation and everything that went there. So looking forward, and welcome, Nevin. Before we go to the presentation, just a little bit about how the webinar is going to work today. Everyone is on listen-only mode, so we can avoid any noises that might be behind on your environment. But we do want to interact with you, so please use the question box to put all the questions that you have. In case of any technical issues, try to switch browsers or log on and log off. The recording will also be available after the webinar. We cannot do what we do without the help and support of different organizations around GTA, and these are some of them that helped us finishing our conference this year. Was one of our biggest events so far with over 900 people, and it was really great to see everyone there, all our community growing, and sponsors helping us to grow this community. So thank you very much for your help and support. A little bit about Nevin. I got to know Nevin accidentally, and the more I talk with him, the more interesting he seems. Like very focused on improving the environment where people work and lead and be successful. He lives in Regina with his wife, and they are right now planning for their sabbatical. So what does that mean is that they're going to travel across Western United States, and throughout June, so for over a month, he wants to go and meet employees and on their environment to learn about what are they doing, how are they improving on their setup, because he wants to know more about opportunities and responses that people have when it comes to working environments. So go and help him and give him ideas on the link there on the crosspollination-tour.com, and you can learn more about him. So with that being said, Nevin, thank you for joining us. Thank you for finding time to spend with us and share your story with us. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thanks for the invitation. It's really cool to get to share this information with individuals that are taking time away from the work of the organization to think about how we work. It's very gratifying to get to talk with folks like yourself and do that. A little bit about me. I've been with iQmetrix for 7 years. I'm not quite sure what my job title is. Actually, nobody is. I have spent the last 7 years in many different ways coaching my colleagues. So I help both individuals and teams to figure out how to get the results that they most significantly want. I really enjoy the work of Stephen Covey, Seth Godin. I really appreciate the ideas within Crucial Conversations. So you'll often find me citing that stuff to my colleagues and helping them figure out how to put it into practical application. iQmetrix has been a very very successful software as a service company for the last 18 years. We provide a software within the wireless market, primarily to retailers selling cell phones, and we have clients throughout the United States and Canada. Uh, iQmetrix actually really cares a lot about culture. And so we're passionate about our product and providing a valuable product to our customers. Most people are here and rave about the culture and the people in the organization. Just before I get into the experience we've had with Holacracy, I do have to spend a moment and just give you a really brief outline, if it's possible, for what Holacracy is. I've asked you to be prepared and know a little bit about it, but it's such a significant change from the way that most of us think about how organizations work. And in fact, everything that we've been experiencing through school, family, other organizations that we've worked at, or perhaps where you're at now, it's all built on this command and control structure. And it's not naturally the way that humans just organize, but it's just so embedded that that ends up being the way that we expect that we're going to work often. With Holacracy, we're challenging some of those fundamental presumptions. And Holacracy is often described as an operating system. Whatever the operating system is that organizes your computer, you might do an upgrade. You might change how some of those fundamental pieces work, and it won't change maybe the work that you're doing inside of it, but the nature of how you connect and you work with each other. One of the key things that Holacracy does is it changes us from talking about the how and being really specific about expectations of how people will behave to talking about the outcomes, the what that we want to see. It also does a very good job of making clear who has power and not centralizing all of the power at the top of an organization. For those of you that are familiar with Getting Things Done by David Allen, Holacracy is also described as getting things done for organizations. Getting things done helps people know that they're working on the right things and to feel confident that everything is sort of captured, or that they are confident that the most important things they can do are on their list and being taken care of. And so this allows us to do it for the entire organization with Holacracy. Before we get into content, and I do have some, I definitely want to say that I'm better at conversation than presentation, though I don't want to suggest that I'm good at either of them. But as we go along, if you have any questions, please, if you want to challenge me, if you want to dig into something, that's going to be a way better use of our time than what I'm offering for you here. So please go ahead. I've got my content broken up into 3 different sections. I will start with some of the reasons why Holacracy has gone into, iQmetrix has gone into Holacracy. Then we'll talk about some of our strategic choices we've made in terms of how we're doing implementation. And lastly, I'll tell you about some of the early results that we've seen. So from the moment we really started studying this in earnest, we've been in it for about a year. And so seems like a fun time to tell you what some of our really early, because it's a long-term commitment, some of our early experiences are. Let's get started with some of that why. One of the really fundamental reasons why we're doing this is because we have a visionary CEO that has believed that there is a better place for everyone to work and a place where he wants to work ever since he started business. So for a very long time, he's said the fundamental command and control system isn't the kind of place that he wants to work in and that we're not working in. And so actually iQmetrix from the very beginning hasn't been in what we're looking at here, which is a more conventional hierarchy where the best producers, the smartest decision makers, the dominant voices of the organization are at the top of the organization, and they have a very clear sense of what needs to be done, and also a very clear, very experienced, proven sense of how it's going to be done. As you go through the organization, you can see that the ability to understand what is needed and the purpose of why we're doing it diminishes. And also, people are less skilled at the how and making choices about what it is that we need to do as an organization as we go along. This kind of organization, which I think you're probably all familiar with, could be typified as I know best. The people higher up in the organization know best to the point where they will veto choices, or they will say how things need to be done. And of course, this has never worked for most of the people that are at iQmetrix. Certainly hasn't worked for our CEO. And so he has chosen, and we have chosen, to be in the kind of organization where everyone is trusted to have very good ideas about how they're going to work, how we're going to solve problems, how we're going to do things to deliver on our purpose. And also, we're very clear about purpose, and we're asking everyone to take responsibility for the outcomes and what we're trying to achieve. So we're saying, we don't know best, you know best. However, as iQmetrix has gotten bigger, this really starts to get harder to carry on. As you're going to see, iQmetrix used to be able to do this when we were smaller and everybody understood it. And then as we get bigger, we're unable to do this quite as much. It's still in our DNA. There are still people all over this organization that talk about this and believe in working in this way, but we get bigger and systems start to diminish how we're able to do it. I will point out, I did do some highlighting here just to make it clear. The purpose is very evenly shared. Everybody has a sense, and the how is everybody's trusted to know how we're going to get there for their piece that they are responsible for. And so when we're at a 400 people size, it's getting a little too hard to keep that culture of trust going when some of those visionary personalities right at the core of how we're doing, or how we trust, to keep it alive. Simply the deep conditioning that all of us have, the expectations that someone knows better or that there is someone judging us, it just creeps in. What happens is that people that are very adept at being that dominating personality start to be it, and less ideas come up. People start making different choices than what they want to bring to the organization. What other people, they end up finding what other people judge to be right for the organization. We have not been failing. We're far from failing, but we can see that it gets a lot harder as we get bigger, and it could be better. Holacracy offers us a much more organized way to find the balance between the autonomy we want each of our colleagues to have and the alignment and the cohesion that we desire. We've had tremendous success by giving people that autonomy, by asking them to take that autonomy, but we want to make sure that it's consistent and that we stay aligned as we get bigger. This is a natural pause for questions or anything people have related to that. as I go into the next section?
I guess so far no questions.
Okay, that is a glowing endorsement of me.
I think the how is going to be the more question-raising section.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a very short presentation, by the way. It's built for you guys to all be able to go have a full lunch as well if you don't ask any questions. So I'm trusting I will get confusing soon. With the how, we've made some choices for our organization, and I'm going to see if I can share some of those with you. So you're going to quickly see that I'm not telling you how to implement Holacracy, but I'm telling you about some of the specific choices that we've made for us to do it. We have brought in a very excellent consultant that is a certified coach of Holacracy. Doesn't work for Holacracy One, the organization, but he has helped us along our path. He has trained internal facilitators. We've trained internal coaches, so I'm both a facilitator and a coach. And all of our facilitators and coaches certainly have an in-depth understanding and have learned the Holacracy process and can be good referees, which is often what a facilitator is for the circle that they're helping with. But we also have a strong commitment to knowing the spirit of Holacracy and endeavoring to clarify power and build self-management responsibilities, even if we don't follow the rules perfectly. We're working to find a balance that allows teams to have confident experiences, have success, still deliver on what they need to deliver, even if it's not perfect Holacracy practice. The rules should not trump the practicality of the business for us. In terms of how we've rolled it out, we started with a boot camp for probably 40 of our 400 colleagues, influencers that were interested or would have a significant role in the implementation of Holacracy. That was a 3-day boot camp when we all got together. And then what we've done is taken roughly 1/5 of our colleagues at a time, provided a 1-day introduction, worked with the lead link, which is the sort of key vision establisher within a circle, help them set up their circle and have some benchmarks to help them get clear on what their circle needs to do, and brought in trained facilitators, or our own internal trained facilitators after they get an experience with the master coach to get them started. And after all of those steps and 4 tactical meetings, tactical weekly meetings with the master coach, those circles are off and running with one of our in-house facilitators. And roughly every 6 weeks over the last year, we've launched another wave. We actually now have near complete coverage where everyone in our organization has gone through one of these introductions and had some facilitated tactical sessions with the master coach. I will, there are 2...
Nevin?
Sure.
Nevin? So
yes.
I don't know if you're going to talk down the road, but there is a question from Nimat. What were some of the challenges to implement this? What were some of the anxieties and concerns? How did you get buy-in from all levels? Maybe you're going to talk about those, or maybe this is the right place.
I'm going to try and answer a little bit of it now, and then if I haven't adequately answered it by the end, please let's go back to that again. I don't have a slide called challenges. I will say that when we started that boot camp, a really significant challenge was people thinking that it was such a mess of rules. Like, it was so bureaucratic, and it was against the autonomy and the DNA of iQmetrix. Like, we're gonna bring in rules. We're gonna have all this hierarchy and structure, and I almost forgot to mention that knee-jerk reaction to rules, because it dissipated so quickly. As soon as people start understanding the process, they realize how lightweight it is, how clean it is. Like, there are not extra pieces of bureaucracy, and in fact, you're actively not putting in bureaucracy for the sake of what ifs. You're actually only putting stuff in when you've had a real felt experience with it. I guess I do. I'm going to stop, because there is some in here that represent some of the challenges we still have. The very first thing that people were super skeptical about, including myself, was how much it was structured in rules, and it's gone. There are all sorts of cultural implications to doing holacracy and self-management that we're still experiencing, and I'll wait to talk about that more after I've shared some more slides here. In holacracy, there are two meeting types. There is a daily, weekly tactical process, which is essentially the expectation of how you're identifying projects that create value and fulfill the purpose of your roles and the next actions you'll take. And then there is the governance process, which allows you to establish the bigger picture responsibilities and expectations that you have for yourself or for other circles. In terms of our strategy of implementation, we actually just chose to specifically start on getting good at the tactical process. That was upon the advice of our consultant master coach, and actually one of the reasons that we wanted to go with him is because of that, and it made total sense. It was the much more practical piece for us in terms of what we wanted to make sure that people got. You can't function in holacracy with any sort of authenticity without also doing governance, being able to modify the way we're organized to work. However, we modified the heck out of the actual meeting process for the governance activity. And so I actually want to speak to that for a moment. In holacracy, the expectation for a governance meeting is that once a month, all of the stakeholders, circle members for a circle, they come together and they identify things that they structurally want to change, significant purpose or accountability, things that they want to express and get better organized in the circle and in every successive level of circle throughout the organization. And it's another set of rules. Actually, that image you can't read in the middle is actually the process for doing a governance meeting. And few of my colleagues would be able to recognize what that process is, because we've done this shortcut. And what we've done is we've said, hey, one person, be the steward for governance. Embody the responsibilities of that shared process of identifying changes, and just do it yourself on a regular basis, a very rapid basis. When somebody comes to you and says, hey, I need to see purpose changed, or I need to see structure or accountabilities changed, when they come to you and say, I think a new role needs to be created, just consider if it's safe enough to try. Like, it's not about if you have a better idea, which has been a very significant challenge for a lot of our colleagues. This is part of the cultural change we're having to work through. Is it's very hard not to have a better idea. When somebody recommends a newsletter writer and you say, well, that would work better if we just asked marketing or another circle to do that for us. It's not actually about whether you have that better idea or not. It's actually, is it safe enough to just put that role in structure? This is where the questions start flying, I'm sure. And their responsibility is to make changes to our structure that resolve that person's tension. Almost always, it should just be exactly what they asked for. However, if that person is identifying something that does not feel safe enough to that steward, they need to find a way to make it safe, but also resolve that individual's tension. So we're just not doing that piece of process right now. The starting intention is that we do get to that piece of process, but we have enough on our plates right now trying to get good at the tactical process and the really significant, as you're going to see, the cultural changes that are required to be good at it. I have another implementation step that we've done. Holacracy actually theoretically says you can start from a blank slate. You can actually start with your group, any group, and say, well, what do we need to do? And let tensions or needs or opportunities define how you structure everything. So you can start with an absolute blank slate of expectations for anyone, and we say, what's our purpose for being here? We're going to create great software. Well, then we probably need someone who is accountable for knowing good coding practices. And let's make an expectation for a role and then find someone to fill that role and those sorts of steps. We were not comfortable doing that. With 400 paychecks and many clients that are having SLAs of exceptionally good uptime, we chose to define some expectations for how people, what circles people were in, what responsibilities areas had, all that sort of stuff. So this is a very significant difference that we chose in our implementation than what Holacracy advises. And the more I get into it, the more I believe that Holacracy has a very valid point for how they do it that way, but I'm not the person that has to write 400 paychecks, so it's probably not fair for me to say that. As soon as we designed, the day we were done designing, we said, okay, don't touch it anymore. Now it's everybody in the organization, they get to make it the way it makes most sense to them. So now we're back into the more democratic shared governance process with our modification, but we're saying, what does it actually need to look like now that we've created a mock-up for you? And we've seen some interesting results as that started. I will say that in terms of implementation, one of the challenges with what we chose to do, as safe as it feels, it's been harder to get individuals to feel the autonomy and the power and the responsibility to do the designing or making the recommendations, because there was an overt design first established. So if you can imagine, every time you recommend the removal of a role, you have to remember that an influencer originally said that that role was necessary. Another natural breakpoint, and I'm going to tell you about some of our experiences with implementing Holacracy. So when our colleagues have gotten that introduction and they've been trained on the process, we've had some extremely exciting results. And so this is the output that was generated after a meeting when people were trying Holacracy for the first time together. That's not to say that some of them hadn't been participants in a different circle already, but this is the first time that this team was together talking about their purpose and their focus for that circle. And they identified, they brought up 9 agenda items, covered them in a little less than 40 minutes, and actually have 6 actionable steps that they have identified that come from the meeting. So I don't know what that means or speaks to you about, but from my experience, certainly when I was more frustrated with work before my own changes, that was unheard of, to have 6 quality next steps come out of any meeting, let alone a tightly organized one. And agenda items that people care about and that aren't identified by some oversight role. Then when a team gets going and they have an hour scheduled for their meeting, they always end on time. People select how important a issue is to bring up, the ones that they're going to process outside of the meeting or they're going to take care of throughout the week. But in a meeting of a healthy team, they identified 24 separate items that they wanted to talk about, and they identified 19 things that were going to be next steps that individuals confirmed that that step, that output, would help them resolve the agenda item that they brought up. It's really exciting. After our colleagues have been in Holacracy from introduction to those first meetings for 3 months, we asked them, has Holacracy sped you up, slowed you down, or stayed the same? And this is the pretty general sort of experience that we have, which for us is quite exciting. After 3 months of a really significant sea change to how we work, a third of our organization actually is really enthusiastic about it. We're quite confident that that's only going to improve. And Holacracy as a system has never failed to get better every time I experience it. I'm deeply enmeshed in it for the last year, and every time I do it, I marvel at how it gets cleaner and cleaner and better and better. So here's the really interesting thing, and I do promise, or I should scare you perhaps, that I'm pretty close to done what I was going to share. One of the things that's been really apparent to me as we've now gotten everybody through implementation is that everybody got really good at understanding the rules. They understand the tactical meeting process, they understand what their roles are, they understand the accountabilities they have, they understand how to identify actions and projects and even structural changes that will help them resolve their tension. So that first knee-jerk reaction about, oh my gosh, we're gonna be buried in rules, is very quickly forgotten. However, that's a picture of James Naismith, by the way, the inventor of basketball. There's a very big difference between knowing the rules and actually being very good at it. So playing Holacracy well is going to be a challenge that we're getting better at for a very long time. And this is the cultural shift. Things that used to be healthy and used to be really critical high performer behaviors in our environment that was starting to drift into some of that dominator hierarchy are actually really unhealthy now. This is a quote from Brian Robertson, the creator of Holacracy, and he strongly says that it becomes pathological in this healthy environment. So before you type the question, what do you mean? Here are some things that are now different. We ask people not to pay attention to the individuals. We ask people not to identify the wonderful capacity and celebrate the individual that can do something, but instead identify very specifically the work that needs to be done. Let's get away from having an environment where it requires amazing people. If I move to the next one, where we don't need heroes, we don't need individuals that can make things happen out of thin air, so much as we need to figure out why there's thin air. We need to figure out how can we build the structure and the expectations and the responsibilities so that this organization works regardless of the individuals that are there. We actively encourage people to be selfish. If you have a need from your role, something that will help you get better at your role, we want you to say very concretely and specifically what that is. We don't want you to be building consensus and having long conversations and anticipating everyone else's tensions. For an agile audience, I hope that you see the parallel here, which is how valuable it is to get a product out and let people react once the product is out the door. It's much easier for us to negotiate the better solution when people just say exactly what it is they need first. And I'm fond of telling my colleagues that if you just say what you need, you'll be surprised how few of the tensions you anticipated from your colleagues actually come to be. They'll, more often, they'll just say, yeah, that works really good, and I can work with that, rather than you having to do all of that work ahead of time. That's a real exciting opportunity for efficiency in the organization. And I actually want to talk about a few of the places where that's actually happened. So one of the experiences that I've seen with iQmetrix is that Holacracy has helped us be a lot more straightforward, honest, and realistic about what can happen and what is not possible. So teams are having much less frustration with the expectations they have with another team, because there's a much better clarification of what they need from each other and what each of them can deliver. One really specific example that I'm really loving at our organization is that the original design before not designing choice was to put DevOps in a central location that just served everybody. And almost immediately after, there were very real experiences and recommendations of how DevOps had to look, needed to look, to adequately support teams, which is really a lot of movement towards decentralization and custom service of DevOps between or in each team, with some central components still, but a much more honest and clear alignment of what happens in a team and what happens outside of a team. I've seen it a lot easier for individuals to find places where they can make a contribution. It's still not an overnight change when people go to a different role, but it is a lot easier than it used to be, and that goes for resource alignment as well. When we identify a place that needs more focus, it actually moves a lot faster than it ever used to. We can actually find some of that cohesion and alignment that used to be hard in our very autonomy-based environment. We're finding some of the benefits of that cohesion now. Two quick slides, because I really want to get to questions. I want to suggest for folks some steps they can take. You can think about trying Holacracy at a team level. If you're 3 people, you can actually use some of these. Well, actually, you can use all of Holacracy. You don't have to do it at the CEO level. You can try it. I put a question mark after observe iQmetrix because I haven't talked to any of my colleagues about this, but we love to share. So if you're keen to see more, we do most of our meetings over a video conference chat, and we could figure out a way, I think, to have you observe one. Please, you can work with me if you want to. And again, for my Agile audience, just ship it. Just try it. One of the most profound experiences for me in this was printing off the tactical meeting process and trying it with a group of my colleagues that just agreed that we would be super awkward and we would see what worked and what didn't in those early stages, long before we had a consultant or anything like that. A little more broad advice than that is what is a foundational element for iQmetrix. I might say that this is very close to what our DNA is, and Holacracy is helping us get there, is to share context with colleagues and then trust their choices. Get out of the role of being I know better than others, and I think you all probably know this very well, but some of the things that Holacracy has helped us do is get a lot more explicit about expectations and purpose and making it more clear about what we are asking to achieve than saying how we need to see it done. And in terms of trusting choices, Holacracy is really good at pulling us back when expectations are unmet and challenging us to figure out what context we missed before we start blaming someone for goofing off. Okay, I have to stop and drink water. I hope there are some questions.
There are questions, yes. Devjit, he's saying, is Holacracy an approach for empowering the employees more and make them participate in decision making?
Absolutely. It is entirely about employees in participating in decision making. I've started reading Reinventing Organizations by Frederick Laloux, and he makes a very good point about empowering is an unhelpful word because it actually implies and it expects that someone has power to give. Holacracy is actually really good at taking a very proactive ownership of where power is distributed and how it's distributed. And once a person is fulfilling a role, they actually have the power. Perhaps it's empowering if the CEO has all the power, but this is actually about not knighting anybody. It's actually just, hey, you get to make this purpose happen as best you can. Whatever you need.
Ashish is asking, can you give a few examples citing before and after?
Yeah, let me pull on that DevOps one for a moment. I have heard my colleagues in DevOps talk about a vision of self-sufficiency and being guides for everyone to have the right tools and resources at the development team level for a very long time. And we're actually able to just very explicitly talk about the or design by individual needs and what people say is important to actually make that much more of a reality. Maybe another really small example, just to give you a sense of how it looks. iQmetrix has never been good at giving feedback. I don't get very good feedback, and in this environment, I can just be selfish, and I can just say, I want feedback. And actually, I didn't need feedback so much as I needed to be confirmed that I was excellent in all categories. And so I actually just asked my lead link, which is our sort of shortcut way of figuring out how people are getting feedback until we get better at everybody giving each other feedback. I just said, hey, lead link, in the spirit of being selfish, please confirm I'm exceptional in all categories. And if I'm not, please tell me what I need to do to improve. And all of a sudden, my lead link says, thank you so much for telling me what you need. Here's some feedback. Here are some ways that you can get better to be better in each of these categories. I don't know if that's a helpful example. It's the first one I pull. We see that 100 times a day, where people are initiating conversations about things that they need and they care about by simply requesting it, asking for what they need.
And you're doing great here, in case you wonder how you're doing. I'm giving you feedback. Another question is Holacracy more about EQ rather than IQ?
I'm thinking Holacracy has a lot of structure that doesn't require you to have a lot of EQ, a lot of emotional intelligence. The things that people need to have to be good at crucial conversations, Holacracy actually just helps us lay those out. If you have an objection because you have a better idea, it's actually just not a valid objection. The facilitator, the referee, actually says, that's not a valid objection. Please bring that up as a separate tension. Right now, we're not worrying about that. So it actually doesn't require somebody to have the emotional intelligence and judgment to be able to govern themselves from trampling on a colleague. The structure does that really well. In terms of IQ, it also lets us be successful even without being a super brilliant creative mind that makes everything perfect. So I have a project of championing the practice of tracking all of your possible work for all of our colleagues. And I don't know how to champion it well to get everybody excited about it. Rather than me having to have an epiphany about how to do that, I can actually either wait for people to request things of me, like, hey, I'd like a toolkit, and I'd like it to say the following things, or I can simply just go ask my colleagues, please help me. This is the outcome I'm trying to achieve, and I need some help about how to get there. What are some ways that I could champion personal tracking systems among our colleagues? Is it more EQ or more IQ? I don't know. I think it probably requires our coaches and facilitators to have EQ.
So the selfish wants are rejected by another selfish need. What happened to resolve the personal conflicts?
So selfish, the advice to be selfish isn't to be self-serving. Self-serving is just a different sort of challenge that we all deal with in any organization. This would help it be more clear. Like, it would be very hard to say, I want a pay raise so that I can buy a nice car. Like, that's an awful example, but if two people actually have really critical things that they want to do and they're opposed to each other, so one team needs this kind of feature and the other team needs a completely different feature, and which one do we work on? The honest clarifying expectations that this allows us to do is actually just make it clear which one is more of a priority. So wherever they both are, there is a hierarchy. It's not a hierarchy of who has better judgment about what's the right way to do something, but if we have a limited amount of resources and person one wants one thing and person two wants another, there is a tie break of someone who gets to or is asked to express what is the right prioritization of our limited resources. And it's very clear, like there is an unchanging role throughout Holacracy called a lead link, and they have a very clear responsibility to express priority when it's needed. So I can go to my lead link and say, I have two really healthy things that I can do, but I can't do both of them, and I've got different requests from each person. Which one do you want me to do? And they say, and we follow up with those people and say, for the sake of the organization, we're choosing this one instead of this one. And if we keep having a disagreement at a level